this is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're going to look at a really hot new product. This was first shown off, wow, more than half a year ago, but it's finally here. This is the Asus Transformer Book TX300. It's a lot like the ZenBook Prime, but the display detaches Transformer style, and we're going to look at it now. So this is the Asus Transformer Book TX300. Looks a lot like the Transformer Prime. Oh, you got the black surround over here. Well, that's because it's actually a tablet, but 13.3-inch machine. Obviously, we have a backlit keyboard over here running Windows 8 64-bit, Core i7 CPU. It's the 3517U, which is the original Ivy Bridge 3rd generation CPU. It's not the slightly updated 2.0 gigahertz we've seen on some machines. Don't know why. Usually Asus likes to be cutting edge, but lately they just haven't been with the Tai Chi or with this. Not that 100 megahertz is really a big deal, to be honest. So anyway, 1.9 gigahertz Core i7 CPU inside. Full HD display. It's a glossy panel because, well, it's a touchscreen with 10 points of multi-touch. So a lot like the UX31A ZenBook Prime Touch that we reviewed not too long ago. But the big difference here is slide the latch, and you've got yourself a 13.3-inch Windows 8 tablet with a whole lot of processing power inside. Has all the brains of a regular ZenBook Prime Ultrabook inside of here, 4 gigs of DDR3 RAM soldered on, and you have a 128 gig SSD inside, and in the base we have a 500 gig conventional spinning hard drive. So that's a really neat take and a very good value added, because one of the things about Ultrabooks and certainly tablets is the limited storage you get with solid state. So suddenly, when you're carrying around like this, you have everything you would have if you had a ZenBook Prime or a Samsung Series 7 Ultra Touch, basically, in terms of computing power and storage. But plug it in, and you've got 500 gigs of storage there. So if you got all your movies on there, all your music, pretty darn handy. Take a look around the device. It's the usual IPS display. Viewing angles are good on this. It is glossy. It will glare some, but it's not atrocious by any means. Decent sized bezel to hold it with. This is 2 pounds, so you're going to feel it when you hold it. But then at the same time, as I'm holding it like this, let me tell you, it just really feels big in a good way. Like watching a movie on this is awesome. It really is just special. And because this is a full HD 1080p display, when you're in the Windows desktop, you know how fonts are really tiny and all that kind of thing. Well, I've enlarged some of my font sizes, but I haven't used any scaling on here. So when I'm looking at a web page, 13.3 inches, you know, it's a little bit teeny, but not too bad. Certainly better than looking at full HD on an 11.6-inch or 10-inch device. And we're talking about things like Surface Pro or the Samsung Ativ Smart PC 700T. But anyway, as we turn it around here, all of the guts, all of the brains are in here. Unlike your ZenBook Prime, where this looks pretty much like the usual ZenBook Prime swirled aluminum lid, nice looking. We've got these air vents here. We also have a 5-megapixel camera, which is reasonably decent. Not super stunning, but you know, part of that's just that the Windows 8 camera application is really a catch-all kind of app that doesn't tailor itself to any particular camera hardware, but pretty thin, right? So we've got air vents here, and then we've got more vents here, and this is actually where the stereo speakers are. They're doing the same thing they did with one of the Transformer Android tablets, where they called it stereo, but they put the two speakers together on the same side, which kind of minimizes your stereo effect. But don't worry, there's more speakers in the base. Anyway, this here, all your guts are in here. Your CPU, your Intel HD 4000 graphics, your 4 gigs of RAM soldered on just as they are in a regular ZenBook Prime, but in this case, obviously, there's really no room to offer upgradable parts, and putting sockets in here takes up more space. Your 128 gig SSDs in here, your Wi-Fi and your Bluetooth are in here. Everything that is your computer, core computer, is in this 2-pound guy, which is pretty cool. We have a home button right here, as you would expect, and this is capacitive, but it's not one of those capacitive buttons where you barely touch it and you're shot back to this screen right here, which can be very annoying. You actually need to lay your finger on there and hold it for a moment, so that avoids that accidental touching business. Fast and responsive, certainly, because it is a Core i7 Ultrabook, basically, just in a different form than we're used to. Let's take a look at the other half now. So here we have the base. Now, Asus started this whole transformer concept, and we're used to seeing this, and a lot of other manufacturers have copied it. But what is really pretty stunning here to me is that this looks just like the ZenBook Prime Ultrabook base. It's not cheeseball. It's not really light. You're not giving up anything. We have the same cut-in around here so that your keys are dropped down. They're not going to hit your screen, and also it drops down a little bit for comfortable typing. And this is a backlit keyboard, something we just haven't seen on any of these with optional keyboard docks or included keyboard docks. They haven't had backlighting. This guy does, just like on your ZenBook Prime. White backlighting, the keys illuminate, and a ring around the keys illuminates as well. Large trackpad over here, pretty much the same experience you get with your ZenBook machines, which means it's an okay trackpad. It's not the greatest. Mostly it works for me pretty well. Sometimes it doesn't pick up a touch. Knowing Asus, there's going to be a driver update soon. This always happens. They always have a driver update that fixes this. And the multi-touch works pretty well on it. It does tend to think you're swiping left all the time and you're not, which is, one of those annoying things that happens with a lot of Windows 8 machines. So we have a full 13.3-inch keyboard here, no compromise. When you put these two parts together, you have your standard 13.3-inch Ultrabook. Nice stuff right there. This is where up top here is where you're going to stick your tablet in, and there are locator hinges in here, and then there's a pass-through power port, and also carrying USB data. Now, this is very stiff. It's hard to turn on its own, so you don't have to worry about this guy being wobbly. I can barely turn it to show you. But there it is. It's actually pretty easy to mate. They have a little locator arrow. You line up the Windows logo with that, and this is your slide to release latch. Works pretty easily. Given that the tablet is large and 2 pounds, and you probably want to use 2 hands, one on the slider switch and another one on the tablet, obviously, and then you probably put both hands on your tablet to lift it out, though you really don't have to. If we take a look at the back side right here, we can see these little grill vents, just like we've seen, again, on ZenBook Prime computers. And this is an additional set of speakers. There's one on each side. So when you're just using the tablet, sound quality is decent for a tablet, but not hugely loud. When you add this into it and you have sound coming out of the tablet section and out of this, really better than average sound for an Ultrabook. Pretty nice sounding. And this has the Bang & Olufsen Ice Power Audio. Some kind of partnership that Bang & Olufsen has going with Asus to make the audio for these products. So how about ports? This is what's pretty cool too, because with the usual ZenBook Prime and a lot of Ultrabooks, you don't get a whole lot of ports, but because all of the brains are actually in the display section, the tablet section, there's more room to put stuff in here. So we have our 500 gig internal hard drive here, and this is the new magnetic style charging connector. It's sort of like a MagSafe Apple connector. And this is our SD card slot right here, full-size SD card slot. We've got indicator lights for charging and hard disk activity. And on this side, my God, actual built-in Ethernet. No more of those included little Ethernet dongles. You don't need that anymore. 2 USB 3.0 ports. They are not color-coded since they are both USB 3.0. And this is a mini display port, also a first for a ZenBook Prime kind of machine. So a lot more display versatility there. I love having the Ethernet built in as well with a little drop down. Asus ships it with their usual block style charger. To me this looks a little bigger than some of the ones they've used in the past, and again the connector has changed, which I like. I was never fond of their kind of small connectors that they used. So this is the big magnetic connector, and it actually works pretty well. You can plug this directly into the tablet, or you can plug it into the keyboard base, and it only fits in one direction. It's got a little shape, D shape right here. And once you get it lined up, it just kind of pulls in, and somebody knocks it. The idea is you can knock it off, but obviously it doesn't come off too easily like that. You really have to give it a good little yank. Okay, so there that is. Now as we look back at the tablet again, we've got our data connector that mates with the dock. We have the charging port, again the magnetic charger plugs right in there, and we have a micro SD XC card slot. We're pretty light on ports otherwise here. We've got a headphone jack. So that's a good idea. Obviously, you might want to be carrying this around and listening to music or a movie or something like that. You don't want to have to plug into the base just to get audio out. And we have micro HDMI here. So that's actually on the tablet. So say you just want to output to your TV or something, you don't have to bring the whole contraption with you. Not that that would be so hard, would it really? You're still talking about a 13-inch Ultrabook, but you can just use this. Also handy for displays, too. Just walk that right up to your projector if it has HDMI. Right here we have our volume controls. And up top is the power button. Sticks up just a little bit. I have not had any problems accidentally actuating it. And it takes a good little press, so happy with that. And obviously the power button should be on the tablet section because you might want to turn this on or off or wake it up or put it to sleep independently of whether or not you're using the keyboard dock. Got some microphones along the top edge. Really nothing much to see up here. And nothing much going on this side here. So pretty clean design. Would be nice if there was some kind of USB port on here, even mini USB where you need an adapter, but well, not going to get that here. So how do you put them together? Like I said, it's really not so hard. Just kind of line it up right there and hear that snap right in. There it is. It's a pretty firm connection. I really would not do something like try to carry this around by the display section, something you might be tempted to do with an Ultrabook because, well, it is only a clamping mechanism. Not that it falls out, not that it wobbles a lot. So if I'm using the touchscreen, see, it's not bouncing around a lot. I mean, it's pretty stable. It's a nice, stiff hinge. You can go back about that far, not too far, in other words, but more than adequate. It's an IPS display. You have great viewing angles, so other than avoiding some glare, not too much of a problem there. And again, like this, it looks just like a normal Ultrabook, doesn't it? Nobody would ever guess that you got a little transformational trick going on here, except for the very subtle hinge mount, which is kind of nice. It doesn't stick up. Like on the Helix, boy, it has a giant plastic sleeve that comes up around, or magnesium and plastic sleeve. And even Toshiba's upcoming new transformer is going to have a pretty hefty mount area here. So this is pretty clean, pretty adequate. Feels solid. When you close it, there it is. Nice enough looking. Notice it's going to be thicker than your ZenBook Prime because usually ZenBook Prime, the lid is very, very thin. On this, it has to be thicker because all the computer internals are in the top section, and there's a touchscreen which adds some thickness. So not as super uber skinny as a ZenBook Prime, or certainly not as skinny as the Samsung Series 9 Ultrabook, which is half an inch thick, wildly skinny. Hinge sticks out a little bit on the back, but not too ugly looking there. And this together, well, here's the bad news. 4.2 pounds. If your average Ultrabook is 3 to 3.5 pounds, this guy is going to be heavier. That's the price you're paying for this. That said, 4.2 pounds still is not a horror. It's not a deal breaker. It's not like a 5-6 pound notebook you're carrying around. But for those of you who are looking to travel as light as possible, this guy is not the lightest option. Of course, most other transformers and convertibles are smaller. There's a couple that are bigger, like the Yoga, which weighs about 3.4 pounds, and the XPS-12, a little bit smaller, about 3.2 pounds, but all the rest are like 11.6 inches or so or smaller, and that's one of the reasons they're also lighter. And for a comparison with another Ultrabook, 13.3 inch, this is Lenovo IdeaPad U300 Touch, a fairly affordable Ultrabook, and you can see that the thickness is really not so different between the two of these. So this Transformer book only looks thick if you're comparing it to the absolute thinnest guys on the market. Otherwise, you're looking at pretty much the same footprint here, same thickness. So back to being in normal laptop mode, anything you can do, again, with an Ultrabook you can do here. Touchscreen works very well, is responsive. Just fine. If we want to get to the desktop, we can either hit Windows and the D key or just tap on our little desktop tile right there. And there it is. Always very fast, always very quick. Now, those of you who follow the ZenBook machines, you know that there's been a little brouhaha over SSD drives. You either get the SanForce ADATA 128 gig SSD, which is pretty quick, or you get the SanDisk U100. Now that's been revved, but it's still not the sharpest knife on the block. I've been lucky, and just luck of the draw, even when buying these, I've gotten so far the ADATA SSD drives that are quicker. This time I did get the SanDisk U100, so if you want to see how that did in benchmarks on Crystal Disk Mark, well, you know, it's not the most impressive thing. Here's our score right there. So you can see it does great on sequentials, but it all starts to fall down a little bit. I would like to see the 512K here write speeds to be just about where those read speeds are, and the read speeds would be nice if they were in the 300s. These numbers are always typically lower, though this is still not super impressive. But here's the thing, honestly, in everyday use, can you tell? Would a normal person ever even notice? No, they wouldn't. Even when installing software, it's wickedly quick. So there it is, for those of you who are wondering if the SanDisk U100 is still around, as well as the ADATA drive. Certainly it is, because we got it in this particular machine. Which one will you get? You know how it is. I can't tell you. The sticker is on the inside of the box, so you never know until you actually buy one. But again, even me, a geek, a need for speed here, experientially using this, I can't tell the difference. In terms of our Windows Experience Index, it does pretty much what we would expect it to do for a Core i7 Ultrabook with these specs. So here is our results. We have a 7.1 for the processor, RAM is 5.9, graphics 5.4 for desktop graphics. That's pretty good. Somehow Asus always manages a good number, even if their RAM number isn't that high. Why do I say that? This uses Intel HD 4000 integrated graphics, and that does use system memory for its use. And, well, if you got slow system memory, then you're going to have slightly slower graphics. So anyway, 5.9, that's kind of average. Doesn't look like dual channel to me for RAM, but graphics actually looks almost like a dual channel RAM configuration. Go figure. So 5.4 for desktop. Gaming graphics, 6.3. Again, that's pretty average and acceptable. And disk data transfer rate is 7.6 with our famous U100 SSD drive here. This does not measure the 500 gig hard drive, and why is that? Because it is actually set up as a USB external hard drive. Well, you know, in terms of system internals, that's how the operating system is looking at it. When you attach and detach it, it says disconnecting from USB hard drive. So that's how stuff's connected here. This is all through USB connections, everything that you got right here. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? At least your keyboard, your trackpad, and your USB ports are interfacing in that way. So speaking of, you can see what we've got under my computer here. And we've got our C drive, and they've shipped it by default with the 500 gig hard drive partitioned into two separate drives. Now you can reformat that and set that up the way you want, or you can repartition it. But that's how they've set it up. So a whole lot of space available right here. Really nice to have. So you can throw all of your media files on those drives. And that's why you can safely disconnect it pretty easily, because it interfaces as USB and not as a, say, SATA interface drive. Definitely adds a wonderful element of versatility, feature that I absolutely love. On PC Mark 7, it scored a 4500, which again is average and respectable for this kind of machine. Now, getting back to both performance and display at the same time, more than capable of playing 1080p video, be it streaming or locally stored. I've got a couple of movies set up right here on my 500 gig internal hard drive. Lovely display. Again, really nice, sharp. It tends to have warm tones. Asus ZenBooks do have warm tones. You can fiddle around with your brightness, but it's not overly yellow or anything like that either. You can see my white here is, well, it's white, so that's a good thing. For brightness, it's 250 nits, so not the wildly brightest display in the world. I find it quite adequate, and it's a very vivid, high-contrast display, so it seems quite bright. The reason I don't want to go with something even higher brightness is because when you're using this in tablet mode, there's only so much room for a battery inside here, so they don't want you to kill the battery with going gung-ho crazy on the brightness. Let's check out a 1080p video trailer to see how it looks. And so we can hear the speakers as well.
I saw something that day. Something I'll not forget.
Pretty nice audio for a 13-inch machine, huh?
It stands 12 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws.
Looks beautiful too.
Its hide littered with the weapons of fallen warriors.
Now you can see we're near maximum volume here. Bring it down a bit.
I drew my sword.
Chop! Dad's leg was clean off.
Oh, that's my favorite part.
Looks great, plays great. Certainly a pleasing machine for multimedia. And watching something like Netflix on this or Amazon Prime, again, really nice with the big screen compared to something like the Kindle Fire HD 8.9 inch or your average 10-inch Android tablet or even the iPad. The bigger experience just really is nice. And now, so you can hear the difference in the speakers when you don't have the ones on the dock or base to rely on, we're going to play that same video again, just using the tablet.
It stands 12 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws.
So there you go. The bass is actually still pretty nice. Nice quality sound, but not as loud.
His face scarred with one dead eye. I drew my sword.
Chop! Dad's leg was clean off.
Oh,
And you can see our volume is at about 76% right now. So it's not bad.
In accordance with...
One of the tests that I use is to use this in a room with an exercycle. That tends to make a lot of whirring noise. If I can actually hear the video I'm watching at the same time, I call that pretty adequate for a tablet or even a 13-inch Ultrabook, and it is loud enough to hear if you're using exercise equipment. Now, obviously, in the end, this is still a laptop computer of sorts, so anything a laptop can do, it can do. We've got IE running here in desktop mode. You can also run it in Windows 8 mode as well. I've zoomed up to 125% to make it a little bit easier to see since we are talking full 1080. Responsive, fast, scrolls fine. YouTube, obviously no problem. It's a regular computer. Works just great there. Word, you can run Photoshop on this, and I have it. It's absolutely just fine, even when working with something like 15 meg raw files. You can do some HD video editing on here if you want as well. CAD work, I know some of you, are, especially you students, are starting to stretch and use Ultrabooks for that with integrated graphics. Well, that's up to you. I know CAD programs usually like to have dedicated graphics, which is something you're rarely going to find, certainly in a tablet and even in an Ultrabook in the 13-inch size form factor. Social networking, email, all that kind of stuff, fine. And 4 gigs of RAM, I know some of you might be worried that, well, that's soldered on board, that's all I can do. It's really hard to use more than 4 gigs of RAM. If you're a serious HD video editor, and then you probably shouldn't be using this machine. You probably want something more powerful if that's your bread and butter. But other than HD video editing and running virtual machines, that means virtual copies of other operating systems simultaneously inside of Windows, it's pretty hard to use more than 4 gigs. I have Photoshop running, IE with 9 tabs open, Outlook running, Microsoft Word, and I'm still not exceeding 4 gigs of RAM, so I think it's going to be fine. In terms of wireless, we have Wi-Fi here. This is actually Atheros single-band 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. I was pretty shocked because Asus has been using dual-band Intel Wi-Fi on most of their ZenBook Prime models, but not here. And I think the reason is the particular Atheros adapter that they used is very low power, and they're trying to conserve as much power as possible so you can use this guy in tablet mode. That said, I have had absolutely no problems with reception. It's actually been very strong, better than some of the dual-band configurations that I've tested on, like the UX31A Touch. And throughput is just fine on it, no dropout of connection. So it's working very well. So unless you have to have 5 gigahertz, then it could be a deal breaker. But if you don't have to, it's fine. We have Bluetooth 4.0 in here as well. This guy does not have a SIM card slot. Maybe overseas in the future there might be one, but I'm not going to find it on this one. We have a front webcam right here, and it's a little bit offset to the side. Really pretty nice and pretty bright. You do have to have a reasonably lit room. If you're sitting in your cave-like living room at night, you're going to want to put some lights on. You're going to look grainy. And the 5-megapixel camera in the back is actually not too bad. Here's something a little less exciting than that. Let's go over to here. And here are some pictures that I took with the camera on a cloudy day. So not bad. Actually pretty colorful. We could see a little bit maybe better exposure, but overall, that's pretty nice for the rear camera there. If you want to wave your 13.3-inch tablet around to take pictures, you can do it. So how about battery life? This is way more complex than I bet you would have thought here because, well, we have a battery inside the tablet, we have a battery inside the dock, and this doesn't follow any of the behavior patterns that we're used to on Android transformer tablets, or even what we've seen in some of the Intel Atom-based transformers, which are most of the transformers on the market right now running Windows 8, but not all. So basically, you get 2 batteries here. One of them is a 2-cell 5,000 milliamp battery. The other one's a 2-cell 3120 milliamp battery. So together, you're looking at 7,120 milliamps of battery power, which is pretty darn good. Now, the way that you use those, it's kind of a complex scenario. If you use this just in tablet mode, so far I've seen about 5 hours of use, which is not bad. It's about like an Ultrabook. It'd be nice to see 6 hours, but well, it's not what you're getting. It's 5 hours. If you use these together and you have everything powered on, that means the ports, the hard drive is on and spinning, all that kind of thing, you're still looking at 5 hours. But there's another mode, and Asus has this power control. We'll take a look at that. And here's our full screen power control right here. You can see you can control whether we're using the front or rear camera, power savings, information, that kind of stuff, color balance. And here we have notebook mode, and you can turn on and off. So if you actually change that, you can disable the internal hard drive and the ports and just have the keyboard and the trackpad active, so just for typing and input, that kind of thing. And then Asus claims you can get up to 8 hours. Now all of this obviously involves a lot of testing. It's going to take several days for us to test that all out to see if we really get up to 8 hours. So be sure to check out our full written review when it's ready to see how much battery life we actually got out of it in that special extended mode. But on average, I would say expect around 5 hours with Wi-Fi on and brightness set to a very adequate 50%. By the way, like all Windows 8 machines that have an ambient light sensor, which this guy does, by default, auto brightness is turned on. Auto brightness for your average indoor location is too dim. So if you buy it and you say, boy, my display looks crappy, be sure to check that Windows setting, which is right under your charms here in the general setting. You're going to change PC settings. We go to General. And you scroll through and you'll see Screen Auto Brightness on off. Be sure to check that. Now, one thing that's interesting about this is, with notebooks, what you usually worry about is the heat on the bottom. This is where the internals usually are. It gets hot. Either you're going to burn your leg or you're going to suffocate it because there's air vents over here you don't want to block. In the case of this machine, obviously there's really not much brain power here. There's a 500 gig hard drive inside. That's about it. You get some ports. Nothing much. This never gets hot. You can put this on the couch. You won't suffocate it. You won't overheat it. That's pretty darn cool. On the other hand, because all the brains are here, this is the area that gets warm, particularly this zone right here. Now, it's not going to burn your hand up, but this is metal and it is conductive. It will blow hot air also out of your vents, so you'll feel some heat here. Generally, if your hands are to each side, it's not going to be too uncomfortable. So far, it hasn't made me sweat like all crazy. But if you're going to play something like Civ 5 for an hour on this, especially given there's less room for ventilation in a tablet design, it will get pretty darn warm over here. So you probably, you're not going to want to grasp it in this area if you're doing something like playing a demanding game for an hour. Speaking of gaming, once again, Intel HD 4000 integrated graphics. No dedicated graphics, that means no crisis for you. So that's the Asus Transformer Book TX300. Like I said, it's just starting to become available now. The price in the US for this configuration is $14.99, so it is not cheap. It's right up there with the Asus Tai Chi, which is an interesting machine that has dual screens that we've also reviewed. Obviously more expensive than the UX31A Touch, which is $1,100. It does give you a lot of versatility, and it's really up to you. Do you think a 13-inch tablet is just the bee's knees? It's awesome. Big video is really easy to read text, or do you think, wow, I'd never carry around something that's 2 pounds and that big? That's your decision. How does this compare to something like the HP Envy X2 11.6-inch machine with the same transformer sort of design? Well, obviously this is going to be bigger, 13.3-inch versus 11.6, and the Envy X2 runs on an Intel Atom CPU, not nearly as fast or capable. This can be a main machine, no problem, very powerful. With the Intel Atom machines, I always recommend that you use those as a secondary machine if at all possible, because they're just not that fast and they have smaller internal storage. Usually 64 gigs is maximum there. The same would be true of the Acer Iconia W510, which is also a Windows 8 tablet with a transformable docking that has a Atom CPU. Really, there aren't too many competitors yet. Asus is one of the first. HP is going to have their X2 that's actually running on a full Core i5 CPU, and that's still going to be Ivy Bridge as well. That's not going to be Haswell, even though that won't be out until August. So it looks like for Ultrabooks and tablets, we may be looking at Ivy Bridge until sometime deep into the fall at this point. But anyway, the upcoming HP will be a competitor, though that it only has an HD and not a full HD display, so you're looking at 720p versus 1080. And then there is the Samsung ATIV 700T that I mentioned that we have a review of as well, which is 11.6 inches, so it's going to be smaller and it has a digital pen, so kind of going after a different use case here. I think this is going after somebody who needs a mainstream Ultrabook, something fairly portable, durable, backlit keyboard, nice, and finds a use for this to function as a tablet as well. So that's the Asus Transformer Book TX300. It's just starting to become available now, and it really is a cool machine. I know for some of you, this is something you've really been waiting for. Everything you get in a ZenBook Prime, but, well, in 2 pieces. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to visit our website for the full review, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.